secret now. I see dead people.
Welcome to Blondes and Booze. You are about to embark on a journey, one that often leads to more questions than answers. But fear not, your host, Krista, Aaron, and Brandy have the experience, the perseverance, and yes, even the gifts to pull back the veil and allow us to glimpse the other side. They will share not only their experiences, but will introduce you to world-renowned researchers and experiencers to help you find answers in the murky waters of what we call the paranormal. Their bonds with each other reach far beyond friendship, resulting in a pull no punches approach to the many subjects they explore. Their goal? To open eyes, hearts, and even minds to what lies on the other side, and the answers residing there.
Hey, everybody. Welcome.
Oh, welcome.
Thanks for joining us on this lovely Friday night.
No kidding. It's hot as blazes outside again.
It's awful.
So I think I hibernated all day.
Yeah, I wish I could have.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
You were off today, weren't you?
I was. But, with working in a building with no air conditioning, you have a tendency to not want to go out there. Not on your day off. You're like, yeah, I'll just stay inside.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I get it. I'm the same way. I had some errands to do tonight. I've got a family get together tomorrow, and I'm making potato salad, and I had to fight the people of Walmart this evening, and that was no fun. I know, right? So
I hate Walmart, yeah. Well, they got the best prices in town most generally, but I hate going in there.
yeah, I know. And I've been putting it off, procrastinating all week long, I'm like, I have to do it tonight because I got to be there tomorrow at 1. I got to take potato salad. So
Oh, no.
I had to make that trip. So yay. Fun.
Anyway, so let's talk about real quick. Our very own Bigfoot Michigan Rob has now put out his first book, and it is called True Cryptid Encounters Book 1. You everybody see it? You can get it on Amazon. Make sure you go get one, pick it up. We love it. And the artwork on it, it's hard to see with the glare, but it's done by our own Jason McLean. So this is a really awesome book. Go get one. So there you go.
There you go. And I have one. Brandy has one, and I'm telling you, like, I've started reading, and like a lot of times when I go in to lay down, I'm tired. So it's a book that you can read a few stories out of and catch the ending. Where you're not, trying to stay up all night.
Reading like 600 pages, 600 pages, and you finally get the ending. That's what I love about it. It's the short stories. Yeah, I dig it.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it's a very good book. So I highly recommend it. Everybody going out and you can buy that on Amazon.
Yes.
Yay. So Brandy, why don't you remind everybody what to watch this week, and we'll bring our guests up.
Of course, we've been going over this. Krista, I've noticed our subscribers have been going up and down, up and down. We think it's another YouTube issue. So make sure you go in and check and make sure you're still subscribed and hit the like and notification button so you'll keep seeing all your favorites, including us, on YouTube. On Mondays at 8 p.m. Central, it is Texas Front Porch with Tex and myself. Like I said, make sure you go to everybody's channel and log in and watch them because we no longer simulcast. On Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, it is Bob Van Buren with Van Buren Variety. At 8 p.m. Central, it's Bigfoot Michigan Rob and Beyond BMR. On Wednesday, I think it's starting next week at 8 p.m. Central. Now, don't hurt me if I'm wrong, but 8 p.m. Central, it is supposed to be Danielle Diva and the Diva Dimension. On Thursday at 12 p.m. Central, it is Brunch with Bigfoot Michigan Rob and his lovely co-host Krista. Thursday nights, of course, at 8 p.m. Central, it's us and Blondes and Booze. And if you can't get enough, we're always on at Friday nights at 8 p.m. Central with Blondes, Booze, and the Woo. And on Saturday, Tex and Danielle Diva release their newest episode of Infamous Minds. But don't forget, Jason McLean has his very own channel nowadays. It's Jason McLean Questions Everything. He does mostly pre-record, so you can go back and watch anything that he's put out there so far. Very interesting stuff. And of course, his Donnie Cho is on there with him, and sometimes Bigfoot Michigan Rob, sometimes Tex, just like we always used to do. So go on over there and check that out.
Yep, absolutely. And also, real quick, I want to remind everybody, the Dogman Conference is coming up first weekend in September. It'll be Labor Day weekend, and you can see the lineup of speakers. It's a great lineup there. So if you're in the area, I know tickets are still available. Come and see us. Brandy and I will be there. We have a booth, and we'd love to meet you and say hi in person. So I'm not going to.
As far as I know, except for Bigfoot Michigan Rob, the whole Texas Front Porch clan is going to be there. So, come out and see us.
Yep, absolutely. I'm not going to waste any more time. We're going to talk about tonight. We have Paul Blake Smith. We're going to talk about some UFOs and some crashes and some different things that I'm totally into.
We didn't even plan this, but we're turning out. This has been kind of like a UFO series, kind of. We had night watchers last week, and then we had, all kinds of stuff going on.
Very Littleton last night.
Yeah. Very Littleton last night, and now we have Paul tonight. I'm like, woof. I guess this is the trending topic now.
Right, it is. And then co-hosting, we have our friend Teri. She's been on the show before, and she does a lot of the weird paranormal stuff with us as well. And so I'm just going to bring both of them up.
Yes, absolutely.
There's Teri.
Hello,
hey, guys.
Hey. Paul.
How's it going?
Oh,
it's going good. Actually, it's Friday, so I'm happy.
I had a very rough afternoon. I went down to my apartment swimming pool, and there were 25 young women in bikinis from a college soccer team. So it was a rough day.
Man.
That was terrible.
I'm so sorry.
They were probably wondering, who's this ugly old man walking around here?
I'm so sorry you had to endure that.
I had to suffer through that. It was just awful. Some of the young ladies, a little scantily clad. I barely paid any attention to them.
I'm sure. Oh, that's funny. And Teri, how was your day?
I made it through another day at my new job, so I'm hanging in there.
Good deal. Good deal. You got a cool job. You work for a vet now, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a cool job. I bet it could be sad, but it would be rewarding too at times,
Yeah.
For sure. All right, let's talk some UFOs. So, Paul, how did you get into all of this weirdness?
I'm from Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and that is becoming increasingly famous. Got a big rise out of Brandy there. We have our own 1941 UFO crash. At that time, late April 1941, my grandfather was a judge in town. He was city attorney of Cape Girardeau about a year or two before the big crash. He was city attorney. If he'd only stayed on the job, he probably would have been called to the crash scene in those days, as they thought it was a legal case. And the police often called him into various cases at night. And my family talked him out of that job because they were tired of him taking off at night. They never got a chance to see him. So he accepted a judge position. My father was 6 years old at the time of the crash. And in town, It was a big thing then, but they hushed it up and they were sworn to secrecy. We could go into that a little bit more, but it's a fascinating case. And I began reading more and more about it around the year 1999, 2000. And I thought, where is there a book on this? And I waited for years and I got tired of waiting. So I wrote my own book and it did pretty well. And I wrote a sequel. I kind of regret because it was a little boring, put in a little too much information. So lately I've taken the first two books and extracted the very best information, backed it up with more data, come up with some fresh clues, and it'll be out in a new book form in the fall of this year, 2023. And I think that would be the merit or the background of an excellent show for your program. But I've lived my whole life in Missouri, and I'm quite familiar with that license plate over Krista's shoulder there.
Oh, yeah, the old red. Yep, there. It's an old one.
That's how far I go back there when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I also began reading when I just looked into research on UFOs, the most fascinating, wild claim that a president of the United States met face to face with aliens. And I was skeptical at first. I come from a cynical family. But the more I dove into this, the more I found very serious sources said this really happened. So I put a ton of what you would call circumstantial evidence, but still very convincing testimony and allegations and claims and hard facts into my book, President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. And that did so well. They asked me to do, can you do a sequel? And I said, sure. And that's the book that's out now. It's the Nixon and Gleason Alien Encounter. And there are various parallels between the story. In fact, I've made a top 10 list of the various connections between the two stories of two U.S. presidents going to air bases. So that's why I have these two books over my shoulders. They're still available from Amazon, and we can talk about any of these three cases. I've never seen a UFO, but on Sunday night, as Teri might mention this, I posted on social media, I was sitting outside at 9:50 at night, and this big streak of light came through in about 2 seconds. And I thought, oh, is someone setting off fireworks? But no, this was, I think, a meteorite. It went through the night sky, and then it illuminated everything around it. I'd never seen anything like this. It was really cool, but I understand we're in the middle of the Perseid meteor shower season. It should be at its peak tonight, Saturday night, and Sunday night. If you're up roaming around with insomnia, like I sometimes get, you might want to look outside, walk around in your yard at 11 to like 5 in the morning, especially if you live in the rural parts of the community where there's less light pollution, blocking. That's Brandy. We expect you to get out there with the camcorder. It happened so fast. Trust me, I wasn't able to react like, what was that? And it was gone. So it was a really cool experience. Someone said on TV, it's like a magical experience seeing this. Well, I guess so, but it's all over too quickly. I wanted to either continue or to see more. And
right.
That's it for me.
Well, Teri was with me when I had my first encounter here about, a month ago? A little over a month ago, maybe? Yeah, she's the one that got me addicted to my laser light shining up there. Thanks, Teri.
Uh-oh, illegally flashing a laser light into the sky, huh?
Well, don't flash it at the planes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's where you get into trouble.
Yeah, so we watch the skies, make sure there's no planes around, but then we go out there and we circle the planet or the stars.
Okay.
So, but it was cool. The first time that we saw one, Teri, you want to tell it what we saw?
Well, I don't know what we saw, but she wanted to go outside and do a little sky watching. So we actually was watching this one star that was pulsating really bright, and I sent up a laser light to it, and I study and follow the CE5 where you invite them in, and it blinked back at us a couple of times, and then we actually saw like a little one came out from the right, and then one came out of the bottom, and they just kept circling and coming out every time. Like a littler star would come out, it would come out in a different area around this great big one. I don't know if it was a portal and they were all coming out, or we saw like a mothership and it was releasing like a fleet, but it wasn't normal.
It happened so fast you weren't able to whip out a camera?
Yeah, I mean, we just happened to look up, and I bet it was over probably maybe 30 seconds.
No.
Yeah, and honestly, like I was in such awe because, you know, my perception of a UFO is like this big triangle thing that hovers over you. You know, that's what I had always thought. I didn't know they look like stars until we were out there, and I was like, you know, for it to, you know, like blink lights back at us, I'm like, holy cow! I never, you know, it was amazing. And so honestly, I didn't even think about a camera. So I can only imagine if I see a Bigfoot or something walk in front of me, I'm not one that would take a picture.
Well, and that's the only weird thing. Like the one that we saw one night coming home from Chaneyville, that thing was so close, and I was with a friend. Thank goodness I do have a witness. But I mean, that thing was right on the side of the highway. And I don't know, do they send you like a little telepathic message that, hey, I'm going to let you see it, but you're not going to think about picking up your phone? We watched this thing for a good 3 minutes, and neither one of us even thought about reaching down and picking up our phone. We were just in such awe that it was so huge and so close, and it wasn't making a little noise. And
yeah. What area were you in, Teri, when you saw that one?
we were coming home from Cheney.
Oh, wow.
About 3 o'clock in the morning. Yep.
Wow. How close do you think it was to you?
They were above the trees on the side of the highway.
Wow.
It was that close. Yeah, it was that close. Yeah.
Wow. That's, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Brandy, I really don't know what I would do to see something like that.
See, if I saw a Bigfoot, I would do the same thing. My mouth would probably fall open, and I'd be just standing there going, "Oh my God, they are real."
I'm not. This is what happened to me, and this is probably what happened to me 1,000 times. I see something. Chris and I were staring at something in Land Between the Lakes. We're out there, you know, and I'm seeing it. She's seeing it. I stand up, and I've got my phone in my hoodie pocket. Okay, I'm trying to grab in my pocket to get my phone, and I could not get it out of my pocket for some reason. I just couldn't get it out of my pocket, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. I thought about it, but then I couldn't get it. So I'm like, there it is.
Yeah, so it's crazy. So I get why people don't get pictures of things.
Right, right.
I really didn't even think about it. So
when people find out that I've written UFO books, first they assume, oh, what was your experience? Well, I don't have one, but people start telling me theirs. And I lived across the hall for many years from this woman in her 90s. And she said, oh, when I was a little girl, I grew up on a farm in Alabama. And one day my father and I were walking along, and we could see a craft came down and landed in the pasture out in the field. And I wanted to go forward. My dad grabbed me by the arm and said, no, just let them go about their business. Let them do their thing. Don't go near it. And she said, we stood there and watched the darn thing, and then it took off. And this was a church-going Christian lady who would never lie or make up a story. And I was just like, wow, that's awesome. I never get to see anything.
Wow, that's very cool.
I wonder with her dad's reaction to no, just let him go about their business. If he didn't see them before. It sounds like he may have.
Yeah, it must have been like late 20s or early 30s before UFOs or spaceships or, alien life was in any way mainstream, something you talked about, something you saw in movies or comic books or TV. There was like Buck Rogers in the 21st century, but that was just considered a silly comic strip back then. So it's much more mainstream. And people are more accepting. When we had these recent whistleblower stories in Congress testifying, there wasn't that big of a firestorm of a controversy. I've seen a few political cartoons like, so there's aliens visiting. We got more problems than that these days. We all know aliens are visiting anyway. So for a lot of people, it was just like ho-hum.
Yeah. So let's talk about Cape Girardeau first. Like, can you walk us through the steps of what happened? Did people see things? I mean, just everything you know about it.
Okay. This was on a farm outside of Cape Girardeau, about 12 or 13 miles outside of downtown Cape Girardeau. And in those days, the streets weren't well marked or well lit, especially in rural communities. And they're not particularly well to this day, but even less so back then. But a Christian pastor said he was called at night and told, there's been a plane crash outside of town. Could you come and say some prayers over the victims and comfort their families when they arrive? You know, there's going to be grieving victims and probably a gruesome sight on the ground, twisted wreckage and mangled people and dead bodies and all. And Cape Girardeau was a very church-going Christian community back then. So it would have been a complete natural to have called a pastor. He said when he got home at midnight, close to it, his family said, you look ashen and pale and shook up. Where have you been? What happened? And he told this story. He said, that phone call I got and I rushed out of the house was not a plane crash after all. We drove about 13 miles outside of town to a farm, and there was a small round disc, a metal craft. It was broken open, shattered with debris in a farm field, little bits of metal, and a fire going on around it. And the fire department was there fighting the fire. And the police were there. And he said an FBI man was there. And in reviewing this story and researching it, I thought, this is where I've got him. There was no FBI in Cape Girardeau in 1941, but there was. They had opened an office downtown 1 month before the crash in March of 41. And so that part rings true. According to newspaper articles at the time, Cape Girardeau was beset with some amount of a espionage ring that did some spying and some sabotaging of our factories in town. We had a great German contingent, German farms, German farmers, German residents. And we were very worried in April of 41 about going to the war with Hitler, who was rampaging through Europe. And so this makes sense why they hushed everyone up at the scene. According to the pastor, I was taken over to one side and sworn to secrecy, that this never happened. You never saw this for reasons of national security. They were afraid this would get out and would be reported back to Hitler, since there was a spy ring in the community. Cape Girardeau had so many German residents that we had a Lutheran church, I think it was, in town that held services in German and sang their songs in German. Wow. So it was real popular to be German back in 41 as we inched very close to World War II, which we got into in December. So the story really hangs together. The pastor said, I was called in and they said, there are some bodies. And he went over and they were laid out in the grass. They were small, about 3 to 4 feet tall, and had big bulbous heads, big black eyes, 2 little tiny dots for nostrils, a little slit for a mouth, no ears, gray skin, very creepy looking, your typical grays as we would call them today. And he said 2 were dead, motionless, and that the third was barely still alive. He was respirating. His chest was just barely going up and down. Wow. Pastor knelt down, probably had his Bible with him, and started to read and to say a prayer. And he looked down and he noticed the creature had died. He just went limp. And he said they were wearing either flight suits or tight-fitting outfits, or their skin was super crinkly, apparently, almost like aluminum foil. And whether that was natural or that was a reaction to our oxygen-rich atmosphere, they were blown out of their climate-controlled ship and into the ground and couldn't breathe, apparently. And so they died. The pastor said, no visible injuries on these little men. Wow. I talked to a woman, she's passed away now, but she says, I remember the adults talking about this. I was 10 years old at the time. I lived on a farm between Chaffee, Missouri and Cape Girardeau, and we heard about the crash from these adults talking excitedly. And they said it was a little space ship and had little space men. That's the terms that they used back then. They didn't know anything about UFO, flying saucer, extraterrestrial. They never used that terminology. So I found that believable too. But she says, I remember those conversations. And I talked to a few other people who said the same thing in that same area. They said, oh, if I had only listened to my grandparents, they used to talk about this nonchalantly right in front of me, that there was a spaceship that crashed outside of town long ago. And they said, oh, if I'd only listened or taken notes or paid more attention, if they were only here, my parents or grandparents. One said, I'm pretty sure my pastor from Chaffee also was called to the scene. And she gave me his name, and I went to look him up. And just shortly before I went to research this guy, he lived not far from my community. He was murdered. And his wife was murdered. And it was just a terrible story. Wow. I don't think it had anything to do with the information he held, but apparently a transient, a man broke into their home and murdered them for their cash and their valuables. It's terrible. But anyway, there's another story of the clues that this pastor from Chaffee gave to this Chaffee woman and the clues from this Cape Girardeau pastor. These are men of the cloth. They were very trusted in those days. And they were very serious. It was very dangerous, I'm sure, for a minister to start talking about this. Yeah. And that night, I'm going to tell you guys this story once, and I'm never going to speak of it again. He was a good man, and he kept his word. Apparently, he never spoke to it to anybody. But something happened. About 2 weeks after the crash, a man came forward who was taking pictures at the crash scene, apparently a news reporter, and he recognized the Pastor Huffman was his name, came to his house and said, I have a copy of this photograph and I want you to have a copy. And what it was that Reverend Huffman said, I saw this happen at the time. 2 local men at the crash scene propped up one of the aliens, stretched his arms out and posed for a picture. And this creepy little alien, they held him up and he had his snapshot taken, and the photographer came by, said, I want you to have a copy of this picture. But he also said, I have a copy. I want you to have a copy. Well, the pastor wasn't actually too thrilled because he'd been told to keep quiet, and he really didn't want to be reminded, but he took it and he gave it to his son, who tucked it away.
Wow.
Yeah, his son, about a few years later, they moved to Kansas in a small town, and his son had 2 children of his own, and one of them spoke up in the 1990s and in the 2000s and said, I saw that photograph at our family get-togethers of this dead alien with big bug eyes, big bulbous head on a farm in the background. You could see trees and a pastor. It was what he said it was, according to the family. She got it out of her grandmother, what her grandfather saw. The grandfather passed away in 1959, and the grandmother died in 1984, but they wanted to keep that story alive. So the granddaughter, came forward and said, I can corroborate that photograph, which someone stole. A family friend said, I'd like to take a look at this photograph. I know something about photography. I'll get it right back to you. And he took off with it and never came back.
Oh, that's a shame. I was just going to ask you where
that photo is.
Yeah. So on the internet, if you do a little Google researching, you'll see a recreation of this, of 2 men holding up this alien. Well, that was done for a TV special called The Secret Evidence That We're Not Alone, that ran on the Sci-Fi Channel around 2003. And they did a good job of recreating it, but the actual photograph has never surfaced. And I'm wondering, whoever lives in this man's house, the photographer's house, could you check the attic and the crawl spaces and the basement?
Right.
Away. Well, I wrote to that family and they never wrote back. A number of people I tried to contact, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to either write me back or speak about it. A few people have come forward with more information, and including a woman who said, my fiance turned husband told me the story because he was the one who saw the crash at the farm, ran inside, called the police and the fire department, and ran out to the spaceship. And I think he was the one who dragged them out of the crash itself to try to save them, being a do-gooder. And it's dark, but the flames were going up all around because the crash caused this fire. This fireball ignited the field. So that I tried contacting her recently, got her name, and I can't get through to her. And the guy said, I think she was warned by the military, keep your mouth shut, or else, even though she's in her 90s, she's probably still quite afraid. So, that's a typical story. We can't get hard evidence or an eyewitness now on camera. they're either afraid, sworn to secrecy, or they're all passed away.
Yeah, that's a shame too. Do you know where the location is without
In
telling
a
your?
kind of somewhat general sense,
Mm-hmm.
between Cape Girardeau and Chaffee. And in doing research for this, I went out and searched, and it's tough doing a ground search. I thought, well, this is easy. I'll find this. And you're driving alone and traffic's whizzing by you. And people are like looking at you. If you get out and walk around, they're suspicious, like, who is this guy? What's he up to? And the fields are growing great crops, and there's lots of weeds. Trees are out.
Yeah.
Summertime is definitely not the time to look. It's probably more in winter when everything is down, the weeds are down, the crops are gone. And also, I was told this by a number of people, you better be wearing sturdy boots, pal, because there's rattlesnakes and copperheads in all these fields and in these. And that made me think, well, I'll just leave up to someone else finding the actual crash site someday. It might be injurious to my health from snakes or any possible government agents that don't want you to find the crash site.
Exactly.
Right.
They want you to learn. So I'm probably better off having not specifically found it. But I think I've got it pinpointed to the general area. And I'll discuss that more in this book that's coming out this fall, this compendium of all that I know about the story. There was one other story that seemed to corroborate. A young man came forward, said his grandfather was on his deathbed, essentially, with stage 4 cancer. And he said, you know, this story of Reverend Huffman going to this UFO crash? He said, that story is true. And I was there. I was one of the firefighters fighting the blaze in that farmer's field. He said, I was on the Cape Girardeau Fire Department force, and we were called out to the scene. And sure enough, he said, the story's true. It was a round disc, 3 dead bodies, 3 aliens. And the military came in and an FBI man and circled the site and told us, you know, you didn't see this. This never happened. Took back all the notes and said, drop that debris, no souvenirs. And they caught him trying to stuff a piece of shrapnel, metal debris from the spaceship, into his pocket. And they chewed him out, booted him out of the crash site. And then he said, in the days afterwards, he had his phone tapped and he was being watched around town because they were afraid that he would get recriminate or, you know, get even revenge on having been chewed out and embarrassed, thrown out of there. So I looked it up, and yes, indeed, in 1941, the government through J. Edgar Hoover just skirted what few wiretapping rules there were, and they were crazy about wiretapping anyone they felt like. In 1941, John F. Kennedy was wiretapped when he was moved to South Carolina in early 42. The FBI was following him around because he had found out a lot from his position in the Office of Naval Intelligence, which dealt with top secret reports. And I'm wondering, this would have been the hottest story of 1941 and early 42. What did JFK know? And they were afraid that he would blab because he had access to just about everything in that office. He would type up reports and supposedly send them over to the White House for the President of the United States. So that's a juicy but unsubstantiated story that maybe JFK knew, but certainly J. Edgar Hoover hadn't been told by the FBI field agent in Cape Girardeau at the time. So much of the story seems to hang together. I think it's true. My stepmother said she heard it way back in the 60s before this became kind of a viral thing in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I've been told, and I don't know this for a fact, that Rush Limbaugh also heard the story when he was growing up in Cape Girardeau, when he went to high school in the 1960s. So he died without comment a couple of years ago. I wish he had said something, but he came from a very conservative family, and they were wild about airlines, airports, flying. His father was a jet pilot in World War II and the Korean War, and they all practiced in this airfield that was not far from the crash site, apparently in Southwest Cape, out in this rural community. So it all fits together. And it's just fascinating as can be. And I was glad that I was able to put this together and put new notes into this for this fall's re-release. And I hope more people will come together, or at least send me an old diary, photograph, FBI report, an old report that got squelched. I'll take anything. But so far, it's just little scraps, little bits and pieces. And I think the story is true. And I haven't found anyone yet that says, "Oh, this is a lot of nonsense." People look at it and they believe it happened 6 years before Roswell.
Right. 6 years before Roswell. Yeah. Yeah. So technically, I mean, it would have been the first documented, I guess, more so case, right?
Right. There was a newsman there taking notes and taking photographs, and he was told to hand those over. No photos. Don't put anything in the newspaper. And I've checked thoroughly, and they did not put anything related to the crash in that paper. But I found a little clue a few days later, or like the story of the crash happens in late April 1941. We're not sure of the exact date, but I found a date where President Roosevelt held a press conference in his White House and warned about international keeping a watch, defense, that sort of thing, keeping your eyes peeled for anything. And at that same time, there's a report of a bomber plane circling over Cape Girardeau at 8:30 to 9 o'clock in the morning. And I said, where did this thing come from? So this gives you a clue that the military of all places in the whole world sent a bomber plane, very expensive, top-notch technology at the time, to circle around and around Cape Girardeau at the first light of day. And that might be a clue that the Air Force, or the Air Corps in those days, was looking for any further crash sites, anything secondary, any bits of debris on the ground. Why else would a plane that people began to notice, and the newspaper put it in the paper, not realizing probably that this had something to do with a UFO crash that they were told not to report on. So this was the next morning, and it was so notable. Everyone kept seeing this bomber plane from the Air Corps. So, that is a clue. That happened on April 25th. So I think maybe our best indicator that it could well have happened the night of April 24th, 1941. But, still not entirely 100% certain.
Wow. That fascinates me.
That's crazy. Missouri is definitely crazy. That brings me to the topic of the famous UFO sighting in Clearwater Lake, which is Piedmont, Missouri, back in 1973. 73. And, they just celebrated a 50th anniversary type thing, and they had a little festival and everything, and they're very proud of that. I mean, I don't know if they should try and claim that they're the UFO capital of Missouri. Or do you think it should be Cape, like I think it should be Cape?
I think something should be commemorating this, and it would be good for local tourism and local economy. However, if you get people directed out to the fields, out to these farm fields outside of town, it would be a nightmare for the property owners. They can't fence this property, and even if they did, people would climb over it. They'd be leaving trash, digging up, looking for clues. Show us this crashed alien, and camping out at night and throwing their garbage down and going to the bathroom. This is people's homes and their businesses. So it would be just, an ultimate nightmare for those, if anyone tipped off the actual site of the crash. And again, rattlesnakes and copperheads. You don't want to camp out in the ground anywhere really in the summertime. You'd be taking your life in your hands, or some farmer come out with a shotgun, get off of my land. It could get really ugly and crazy. But you're right, Brandy, Cape Girardeau should do something to commemorate this with an annual event or a convention or a museum. But I'm just baffled what we could put into that, to get people to show up. Maybe recreations, models, of figures of humans and aliens and the crashed open disc. But still, that costs a lot of money. And old Polly's not a millionaire. Haven't won that lottery yet. Just lost the Mega Millions. There goes $1 down the drain. So we're at a loss what to do.
I don't know if Piedmont actually has the title yet I know it's in the works, and they've done a couple documentaries about the lights out there. It's just amazing how Missouri is just a crazy, crazy place. There's so many things here. We've got cryptids and paranormal and UFOs, and it is an amazing place. I'm surprised they're not, people aren't beating down our doors already trying to get in here. I guess they, with the newest, I'm going to call it the soft, weak disclosure that the government has given us, which, they've only told us things we already know, but you would think that people would be noticing Missouri a lot more, and they're not. They're just focused on Roswell and that crash alone.
Yeah, it's unfair, but that's life in general. And that's the mainstream media. You really have to have something substantial to get their attention. And every time we get a little clue on the Cape Girardeau story, it just slips through your fingers. While researching it, I started to cover in my new book coming up on the subject a very unpleasant part of UFO research, and that's cattle mutilations. And I began finding more and more stories from around Missouri of gray aliens, discs seen, cattle mutilated, the kind of coverage that Linda Moulton Howe did some years ago. And I included one of her stories. One of them was from a cattle ranch in Missouri. And the farm that this happened was cattle country, dairy country. And in Cape Girardeau, it could well have been these extraterrestrial creatures were looking for a new victim when they had a mechanical problem, pilot error, weather-related difficulty. They could have crashed for any number of reasons. It's so unfortunate and so unpleasant, but we've got the cows, and they seem to have a fondness for removing organs and leaving the carcass behind very cruelly, if you ask me. It's I don't know quite else how to explain a cattle mutilation. Like an organ or the jaw will be surgically removed, not just damaged by animals and flesh torn, but specific organs cut out just like a surgeon would, and leaving the rest of the dead body around. It's most unpleasant, but you have to face reality. This is going on. And was it related to 1941?
What about crop circles?
I've not heard of those in Cape Girardeau. It's an utterly fascinating story, mostly from Wiltshire, England, and they've become so complex that a crop circle is a lousy name for them because they're all kinds of shapes and patterns, forming these intricate designs. They're just amazing, and there's just almost no way humans can be doing this stuff with great precision. The true crop circles are being altered. The plants are being altered with a little nodule, like they've been chemically changed, not some clown running around at 1 a.m. with a board and a rope and pushing down on these wheat plants, and some of them end up popping up, and that's a good sign you got a fake on your hands. The other ones are in a swirl pattern, and they've been all chemically altered, physically changed, and they're so complex, and no one ever seems to see what causes this. That happens overnight, and maybe within a span of a few hours it was checked on, and you come back later and they find it. So this is something that's very, very interesting, especially with the number of UFO sightings in that area. And Stonehenge itself is in a circle design, and it's still a mystery. What in the world's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. You have a question for, I guess, you and Terry both. Either one could probably answer it. It says, question, do you have any theory as to why people used to witness flying saucers for 50 years and now they witness triangular shaped craft or just points of light now?
I don't speak for the aliens, so I don't know. It's a very good question. I'm not sure if discs are completely out, but it does seem, as the Mike says, that so many reports from years ago were circular. I know the Kenneth Arnold sightings were labeled flying saucers, but he actually described almost a kind of, not boomerang, but there was a special name for it. It wasn't quite saucer shaped, but someone in the media labeled them saucers. And there were a lot of sightings in 47, 48, 52, 54. And just to advance further, as you say, in Piedmont and in all over this country in 73, while doing research for my Nixon and Gleason book, 1973 was a big year for UFOs, but you're right. Some of them are no longer being described as disc shaped, but triangular or cylindrical. I don't have a particular answer for you.
Well, here's my perspective, like, and maybe, like cars today don't look like they did in the 50s, so maybe the alien beings,
Well, technology has changed for us. Why not for them?
Right.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe get better mileage or something with these new created craft.
Well, and here's my theory too. Could it be a different species of alien with different technology?
So many times I read where they think there are multiple races. People in the government say that there might be up to 12 different races visiting here. And there's not much we can do about it. They have superior technology, development. I run into so many stories saying scientists, our Earth scientists now say that they believe there are many Earth-like planets in the cosmos, maybe hundreds, thousands, or even millions. And on each of these could be a sustained life that grows into human form. There could be other human beings. And maybe gray beings or reptilian beings or strange looking creatures we can't even conceive of. And some of them are as advanced as we are or more advanced, and they've mastered space travel. Now, we may joke or kid about it, but a wormhole or a gateway in space where you just go through a dimensional rift where you can travel almost in seconds may be closer to reality than this long space travel that we consider, well, this will take 12 light years to get from Earth to this planet that we've discovered. And, that's by human standards, by advanced aliens. Why can't they come here almost in the blink of an eye or accessing a Stargate or a dimensional portal? So we have to open our minds and say there's probably a lot of different creatures, some of them not advanced and able to master space travel, and others that can. And they don't want to talk to us. They just want to observe us and go home. Someone once said, you go to the zoo, do you talk to the animals or just look them over and go home? You basically look at them and take off. So it may be that way for advanced beings who may consider us crude and dangerous creatures, but fascinating ones. It's always a drama going on here on planet Earth.
Absolutely. Wow. That's pretty crazy.
I'm just like, I'm getting blown away right here. I'm like, whoo, that's a whole lot of information I'm getting.
There was an eyewitness to the 1954 Eisenhower encounter at an Air Force base, Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California, out in the desert where there's nobody around. This eyewitness was a test pilot who spoke up in the early 1980s. And he said, everyone who was there that day is now deceased. I'm the last one alive, and I don't want this story to get out, or to die out, rather. He wants to get it out. So he said these aliens landed in 5 different craft, 3 circular, 2 elongated, and stepped out and spoke in English to Eisenhower. And they were very much like human beings. He said there were only small differences. They were a little shorter, apparently. They might have had different skin tone, and they might have had different sized nostrils for breathing the atmosphere on their own planet. But this is what our scientists tell us now, that there's probably human life forms, maybe like cousins of human beings on other planets. And he said, this is what stepped out of these ships and spoke to Eisenhower. And they were familiar with our customs, our language, and our nuclear testing program. So on February 19th, 1954, Eisenhower was called in from his golf vacation in Palm Springs, and being a brave man, he got the okay from Air Force officials at the base who said they're very friendly and very much like us. And to give him credit, Eisenhower courageously went out to the base and spoke to them on the edge of a hangar. He said he didn't touch them. They didn't get too close, but they close enough to communicate in word English. And they showed their craft to him. And that the test pilot says, I was called in because of my aerodynamic expertise as a test pilot. They wanted my opinion on the craft. And he said Eisenhower was always encircled by some bodyguards, 6 of them, but spoke to these aliens, and they were friendly. And Eisenhower was very courteous. And he said, our world is not ready for this. You're going to have to leave, because he was afraid they would start a panic. And he was probably right for 1954.
Right? Sure.
And you got to wonder today, would it be the same way? I don't think people would panic, but there might be a little social chaos as everyone would want to rush in and see this for themselves. So today they seem to be aloof. We see them in the skies flitting about, not me personally. But you guys see them, they're up to this or that, testing the atmosphere or the land or the sea and flitting about. What I've been told by like Air Force people is that they believe sometimes extraterrestrials are putting on purposeful flyovers to get our attention, to break us in for eventual contact someday, that we are real. And here's our ship, and we're going to go zip it by. And they're doing this on purpose, to get our attention. And so I have no argument for that. It could be. Yeah. Maybe they're going to step out and speak more plainly, like they did to Mr. Eisenhower.
Wow. Right. Well, we got to take a break here in just a minute. And when we come back, I've heard rumors that, and don't answer this now, we'll answer when we come back, that, like Eisenhower, like made a deal with them, like they can abduct a certain amount of people, in exchange for technology, that kind of thing. So I want to hear your thoughts on that when we come back from break. And then also I'd like to hear about Nixon and Gleason.
Sounds like a plan.
And then also, I want to hear your theory or opinion. Are aliens living among us right now?
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna answer all that when we come back. So that's a big old question. I ask everybody that one. Do you think they're here? Do you think they're living with us? Is it your next door neighbor Joe? I don't know.
Right. And so if anybody has any questions also, please put them in caps lock and we will answer them at the second half. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back in 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Four minutes to go, folks. 4 minutes. Three minutes. We're almost there. 2-minute warning, guys. 2-minute warning. One minute. 1 minute.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome.
Appreciate everybody.
I see a lot of people arriving late.
Yep.
I was just scrolling through chat during the break, and my goodness, there's a lot of good stuff out there right now.
Yeah,
Woo.
I've started several questions, so we'll definitely get to the questions. So everybody just stay tuned. So yeah, I've been going back reading them too while we were on break. So anyway, let's get back on talking about this. This just like totally fascinates me because you hear bits and pieces of it. And somebody had mentioned earlier in chat, and I apologize who it was, but they said like this is the most thorough account of the Cape Girardeau crash that I've ever heard. And I gotta agree with that person, absolutely.
It's utterly absorbing and it's frustrating at the same time. But I put all sorts of little bits and pieces of confirmation in what we know, including some documents that appear to be authentic that Franklin Roosevelt mentioned, these celestial wonders that have come to us for his, quote, non-terrestrial science and technology committee. And gee, I wonder what that could have been. Well, any president worth his salt would have put the top brains on this in secret conditions, and he wouldn't even spell it out in a memo. The Cape Girardeau UFO crash or spaceship crash, in dictating these things, he would have said in terms like that that would have been understood to the recipients of his memos. But otherwise, there is a little paper trail. There was a man named Thomas Cantwell, probably as a pseudonym, who said, I worked for the CIA and before them, Counterintelligence Corps, the CIC. And I learned one of our great state secrets was there was a spaceship that crashed in southern Missouri in 1941. And so there again, the man confessed this around 1990 something. He said he was old and ill with cancer at the time, but he wanted to get this big secret out. And he typed it on a regular piece of paper, all in caps, like an elderly person might have found a typewriter and typed this. So, there's another clue that this really happened. A man stepped forward and said, I was at a atomic bomb detonation in 1962. I was hired to do the photography. And while we were waiting for the countdown, I was talking to one of the scientists. And I said, where did we get all this technology to perfect our atom bomb research? And he said, oh, there was like this spaceship crash in Missouri in 1941. what?
Wow.
Not only did it happen, they took some of that alien technology and copied it to perfect and finish off our atomic bomb research. And if so,
Wow.
it changed the whole world. And to this day, we may be seeing all these UFOs over atomic bomb missile silos and air bases and carriers or destroyers that are carrying atomic bombs. And even the Roswell base was an Air Force base that had carried an atomic bomb, I think in World War II. And their aliens are letting us know that we're watching you and we're not too thrilled with your atomic bomb program. And this is specifically what this witness at the Eisenhower encounter said, that the alien stepped forward and said, could you please stop your atomic bomb detonation program? Eisenhower was authorizing these atom bombs to be test detonated in the skies, in the land, and under the sea. And it was an ecological disaster. We were contaminating the land and the sea and into outer space, really. And this is the reason that aliens did sit down and speak to him. And I think that's a pretty valid motivation. They were worried about our polluting the planet and into outer space. And Eisenhower apparently told him, well, I'd like to, but I'm not going to disarm unilaterally. I want to see other nations also take steps to stop building and testing out atomic weapons. So if the aliens who did land and speak to him, if they talk to the Chinese or the Russians or the British, I don't know. That would be a very fascinating bit of research for other nations in that time frame, 54 and 55.
Yeah. Wow.
I wonder if we're going to have more contact because of the nuclear testing. Because that's 10 times worse than anything that we've ever come across. So, it just makes more sense that we may be seeing more or having more contact or things like that with the alien beings because of this testing. We are killing our own planet.
Yeah, Eisenhower wanted to stop, and he couldn't get the wheels in motion to do this. But President Kennedy did get together the nuclear test ban treaty that Eisenhower approved, and it was signed into law, and it still holds to this day. But who knows who's violating that treaty and setting off a few, maybe in the deepest, darkest parts of Russia or the Chinese or something like this. But overall, it is held. So was that a result of alien pressure? I don't know. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're right.
Well, and don't you think maybe we're having more sightings because of the shape that we're in? I mean, I think they're definitely watching.
Yeah. So many stories of not only watching or being observed at missile silos, but in some cases that suddenly our technology was altered, that we couldn't fire them, that they had apparently aliens had messed with our missile silos or our systems that fired them. And, Robert Salas is a name to look into for that. Very serious gentleman who said I was, I think, at a base in South Dakota where we had these UFO sightings, and suddenly our mechanism stopped working and someone had altered our stuff, to put it simply. And it's another clue that they're not too happy with what we're doing.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I can definitely see why.
Let's talk about the Nixon Gleason, and then I want to save Brandy's question for the end because I think that's going to be quite a little bit of a topic. Is that cool with you, Brandy?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, we heard that in the first hour that Eisenhower flew to Palm Springs and arranged on February 19th, 1954 to meet with aliens in the cover of darkness at an airbase. 19 years later, President Nixon did the same thing. Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president, arranged under the cover of darkness to go to Homestead Air Force Base, just outside of Miami. And he took along on this occasion his good golfing buddy, Jackie Gleason. And Gleason came back that night, and his wife was appalled and said, what happened to you? He slumped into a chair, she said. He was ashen, haggard, and emotionally really shook up. And he said, well, this is what happened to me. Nixon took me to an Air Force base tonight and showed me the hard proof that I've been seeking my whole life. He said, we went into a laboratory under an armed guard. Nixon showed me these dead alien bodies, 4 bodies laid out on 4 examining tables. They were about 2.5 feet, dwarfish with big pointy ears and big eyes. And if you're familiar with UFO lore, this matches the description of the 1955 Hopkinsville, Kentucky alien attack on this farm family. Suttons, yeah. They gave the same description, big pointy ears, little dwarfish little aliens. And Jackie said they looked like maybe they had been embalmed. They had no visible injuries. And they were laid out on these tables for examining. And he was able to get a close look. There's a source that says Jackie was then taken to Homestead Air Force Base's big hangar. And there he was shown a circular craft that was up in the air, activated, and had to be held down with cables. And that he saw an alien craft. Whether these stories are true or not, I don't know. But Jackie's wife told this story 3 times. She never changed it, never retracted it. And told it twice while Jackie was alive. And she said, he called me up and chewed me out and said, you're not to speak of this. You're not to talk about what I told you. And then the 3rd interview she gave, it was well after Jackie's death. And she didn't retract a thing. She said, this really happened. This is what he told me. And on one occasion, I was with Jackie when he met Richard Nixon. I know the 2 of them were golfing friends. And I looked it up, and yeah, there's plenty of photos of the 2 men golfing in South Florida. Jackie lived in Miami from like 64 onwards. And in 73, after years of badgering Nixon, I'd love to see the hard proof. Can you tell me about aliens? Can you show them to me? Nixon finally caved in and gave him what he wanted. It was just a few days before Jackie's, I think, 63rd birthday. So what do you get for the guy who has everything except what he really wants? He was obsessed with UFOs. Jackie built his own UFO house, this circular spaceship-type house in Peekskill, New York, just outside New York City. And he outfitted it with powerful telescopes and a Nikola Tesla coil. And he had parties over, and his Honeymooners co-star Audrey Meadows said, I was in there, I saw it. It was just like this round spaceship house that was near the end of a bluff, and you could overlook the valley below. Wow. Like you were flying on a spaceship. Jackie must have spent close to $1 million on this thing. Wow. And apparently one of his visitors to this house, when he got it all finished, was Richard Nixon. So I put this all in my book and other corroborating details and allegations. It's an utterly fascinating tale. And I don't think it was a coincidence. This gets back to what you were mentioning before we went to the break. Was there a treaty signed between Eisenhower and these human-like aliens? Mm-hmm. And therefore, was it Nixon's need to go on February 19th and attend to this treaty anyway? And he just took along his golfing buddy, Jackie, because he had to be at an Air Force base on February 19th in 1973. I looked it up, and in February 19th, 1974, Nixon's digitized presidential records are so skimpy, there's a plenty of papers missing, and ones that are filled out say the president took a phone call today. It was amazingly empty and devoid of what he was really up to on the 20th anniversary of the Eisenhower encounter. But he did fly back to the White House to be back home on the 19th. It was just before the 19th of 1974. So you ask, was there a treaty signed, and what did Eisenhower agree to? And it is alleged that he did say reluctantly, you are so powerful, how can we stop you? I will allow you to take a few people in a rural setting, look them over, and put them back as long as you make a record of their names and addresses, and we can check up on them. And that this got carried away either by another race of beings or by the race he made a compact with, that human beings are being maybe abducted more and looked over roughly with the old rectal probe. And but we are put back, it's not like we're being kidnapped and beaten up and thrown like these cattle that are mutilated back on the ground with, organs removed. But this is a stipulation within the treaty that Eisenhower may well have agreed to, maybe somewhat naively, but he had a point. you are advanced. What are we supposed to do? How can we stop you? And so he may have agreed to this, and then this proviso in the agreement was a bit abused or taken over by another race that decided, yeah, well, we're going to do all the kidnapping and probing and putting you back that we want to do, treaty or. And this might account for some of any of these rather dreadful, painful sounding stories.
Yeah, that's crazy. I want to, our good friend here, Miss Naoma, she says there have been human mutilations. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. I hope not. Like human beings, just like the cattle, I'm not familiar with those. I hope that's not true, but it could be.
Yeah.
We have to be careful where we assign. Absolutely, this was done by aliens. There are some sick human beings that have killed and mutilated other human beings, like Jack the Ripper and such. So I don't know too much about that otherwise.
Isn't Jackie Gleason's house for sale right now?
His house at the Inverary Golf Course, where Nixon sat down and visited him that evening or that afternoon on that Monday, February 19th. It might be for sale right now. I'm not sure. It was for sale a few years ago and went for something like $12 million or something astounding.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's a separate home from his New York City one, which was purchased by CBS, the TV network, as part of his deal to move to Miami. And they purchased it in 1964, and they've been renting it out through a realtor to various wealthy people. And one of the people, I put this in my book, was David Bowie, the rock star, who was almost as obsessed as Jackie Gleason was with UFOs. He did a whole show called, I forget, he created this alien figure and did a rock concert on the very day of the Nixon-Gleason encounter. As this alien figure, and he was just super stoked on the subject. He said he saw UFOs as a young man growing up in England in 1967, and that he also collected books and periodicals. Jackie collected over 1,700 books and periodicals on the paranormal, heavy on UFOs, and they are kept to this day at the University of Miami's library. There's a special reading room where you can go in and see Jackie's book collection. So this is another proof in the pudding that Jackie was just obsessed, and he wanted that proof real bad. And I think he got it. Nixon finally gave it and showed it to him.
Wow. That's
a story, isn't it? Yeah. Famous Ralph Cramden, the president of the United States, Air Force Base, aliens. It's just a great, great story.
Wow. That's fascinating. That's fascinating.
In 1955, Jackie, I'll put this real quick, did an episode of The Honeymooners in which he dressed up as an alien. He came out in this strange suit and said, I am the man from space. And he made sure to inject that into his own show. He was so obsessed. So we know from that way. And according to his biographers, who barely touch on the paranormal, said, yes, Jackie would call up UFO authors and UFO experiencers and quiz them on every last detail of what they found out. He was so obsessed with everything, leading to the question, why was Jackie so obsessed with this topic? But I think like the four of us today, it is so fascinating and an important tale. Are we alone in the universe? That it absorbs people around the world, maybe not as hardcore as Jackie or David Bowie, but you have your own podcast and you've seen things and you want to get to the truth. And some of your followers, your people who are writing in tonight, they want answers too. It's only natural part of the human experience to want answers to mysteries.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of people like chatting. And Miss Naoma, she gave the name here and I wrote it down. It says it's the Lavette Cunningham incident. So I'm definitely going to Google that because I'd be curious to hear more about that,
Sounds gruesome, but it does need to be investigated.
And they said they later found his body mutilated and tried to blame his captain for it. So I'm definitely going to read into that because, that's pretty interesting. What do you think about Brandy's question? Do you think they walk among us?
If they have the technology to come here in ships and sometimes in their own physical form. It may be some are so advanced they can form a human body and maybe some paperwork, some ID. Have you ever heard of an author named Ruth Montgomery? She wrote a series of paranormal books that were bestsellers in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. She worked with her spirit guides who would type automatic writing messages. Pretty wild story, but she was a conservative newspaper columnist who wrote these books, and her spirit guides wrote through her to say, yes, aliens can visit here. Yes, some are very advanced, and in extreme cases, they can assume a human form and walk among us, just as you kind of suspect they do. They're on important missions of trying to bring peace to our world, to prevent pollution and warfare, and others that are noble enough to have this advanced spiritual and physical ability to put on a human form and walk through our society, and you wouldn't know it. And so who knows, your neighbor might be an alien. Might be very strange naturally, but
I'm
how are you going to prove it?
I'm wondering if this is what the government's kind of working up to. Well, they're going to release a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There are more sightings, of course, nowadays. And I'm wondering if this is just leading up so we become desensitized. So when they actually show their true form, we're going to be like, man, who cares? They're here.
Yeah.
They've always been here.
Unless it's really gruesome, like these ones they call the reptilians. I don't think any one of us would want to see that or take that blasé. It reminds me of that Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk faces down with a Gorn, this reptile with huge muscles who comes after him. Really creepy. And I thought they did a good job, even though it was a rubber suit, an actor doing his best to clunk around on a set. That was a reptilian.
Like Land of the Lost or something like that.
Yeah. Who knows what they could look like in real life? Do we really want to know?
Maybe not. You have some questions. Go ahead, Brandy. I'm sorry.
No, it was just going to say, I mean, it really does make you wonder because of the technology leaps and bounds we have made in such a very short time. It seems like to me. I mean, I keep looking and going, boy, we're changing like cell phones, like they're new and improved with new processors, like every year, it seems like. So to me, it's like, well, maybe they are. And that, what this is leading into is they can shift into their true form once this is all let out. I mean, it's just a theory, but it's a possibility. Who knows?
Well, we had a whistleblower.
I think if they do, we're going to be surprised just how many are here.
Yeah,
I really do.
We had a whistleblower named Colonel Philip Corso who wrote the day after Roswell. Said, I was in the military. The spaceship crashes are real. Roswell was only one of them. And he said that the Army intelligence looking into this felt that the gray aliens were bio-robots. They weren't really quite biological entities like you and me. They looked like they were cloned in a lab, and they do the dirty work of a higher, more advanced race. So there's that they might be androids, robots, bio-robots, clones of other creatures. It starts to kind of blow your mind, all the possibilities that could be out there. So he came forward and said all of this, and he got a little attention, and then he passed away. He was an old man. But he wrote a book, and it was reasonably absorbing, but he did make some mistakes. Apparently his co-author injected some information that was not accurate, and that kind of brought down the credibility of the book. But The Day After Roswell still stands as a fascinating story where he says, we not only took that technology, we quietly injected it into other companies, other businesses, corporations, and they molded and shaped it and developed it. And this is how we have cell phones and laptops and laser technology and vision and other things. So that this crash stuff is real, and we've developed it ourselves. Unfortunately, so much was developed into our weapons system, defense programs, and that's top secret stuff. So that may be another reason why the government keeps this hushed up.
Right.
It's a possibility. I mean, growing old with a purpose even said it. With AI becoming well known now, even Elon Musk said that AI is going to be the end of our society. So that just makes you wonder. It makes you
It
wonder.
is scary. They can produce videos right now of forming, let's say, a human face with some crazy animation or something they put up with. If you saw this piece on 60 Minutes within the last 6 months, they have this video of Tom Cruise singing with the guitar and on key, and he sounds and he looks great. It's a complete fake. Artificial intelligence inserted images of his face over someone else, and his voice was created to match on key. And this is just one small example. In the future, you don't know what you can believe anymore, because any person working with this technology may create alien beings landing somewhere and it's all a fake, or create something like a past or current president making an official announcement, and that's been rigged up and it's phony, or a TV network claiming we've got this new story, and it turns out later they hoax the whole thing for attention or ratings. It's scary what lays in our future and how many people could be fooled before the truth is revealed.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mike had asked that question about the whistleblowers, but I believe you answered that. Teri, do you have anything else to add about the whistleblowers?
I can't think of the guy's name, but on that release a couple weeks ago when they done that live, they said that whistleblower that was on there, if they found out that he lied under oath, he's risking going to prison for the rest of his life. So me personally, if I'm going to tell stories, I better make sure the damn stories are true before I
Why would he risk all of that for a bunch of lies,
Exactly.
He has excellent credentials. His name is David Grush. Said that we have been visited, we have crash recoveries and craft and bodies, and that there has been contact. And that confirms every one of the stories I've been writing in the last few years: Cape Girardeau, Eisenhower, and Nixon. He couldn't give more. He was restrained by some sort of order that he had signed to reveal only some things and not other things. It's so frustrating. They did interview other witnesses who said, we saw this, we heard this, we've seen files, we've seen video footage. But the problem is they won't bring the video footage and release that, or a copy of a report, or an autopsy report, an actual piece of crash debris that can be bent and molded and then pops back with like memory metal, as you keep reading about Cape Girardeau or Roswell or other crashes. So it's so tough. This is a step forward, these whistleblowers, and yet we still don't have anything tangible.
Right. Yeah. Right. Another question here. I think it's more of a comment, but it's a good one. Mike A. asks, I think if we really do have alien spacecraft, they are coming from inside the Earth or under the ocean somehow. I've heard that before.
I find the proof on that lacking, but there's been so many sightings of a craft that will go down into the ocean and maybe come back out, or they see it floating under the waves, and that, why not? I mean, if it can go through our atmosphere, our air, why not our water? So they are advanced aliens, technology that's beyond our capability right now. But as you mentioned, we're advancing so fast, maybe partly because of recovery technology. Who knows what we're going to come up with in the next decade or two, stuff that can fly faster than the speed of light and without harming a pilot, or at least drone technology. And there's another fascinating subject, like the Tic Tacs. I don't think there's any pilots in these little Tic Tac shaped ones that can just zip around, and our pilots say these things almost every time they go out. According to this report on 60 Minutes about a year or two ago, they interviewed some pilots, and they said, we see this every time we go up in the air. And is there anyone paying attention to this? That it's advanced, amazingly fast technology that can do so much more than our own aircraft. And then they try to say, well, maybe it's the Chinese or the Iranians or the Russians. And, that's not true in the slightest. They don't have that technology.
Right.
The Russians can't even defeat the Ukrainians in a simple ground war. Well, they have super advanced stuff.
Right. There's so much of the ocean that we can't even get to, that is so unexplored. I mean, it's just, if you could get down there and you could keep everything you want secret down there, that would be the best place on earth. because
Well,
people
some,
can
some
get there.
stories that I've read, if you can do some digging, and there's a lot of stories where naval officers have been out on duty and they see the lights and they see these crafts come flying up out of the ocean. But I guarantee you, they've probably been threatened to keep their mouths shut, and
Yeah.
I also read an article wasn't that long ago. They were talking about exploring the ocean, but one reason we quit is because they think they are down there and they're not going to stir them up.
They're afraid of
or
what
they
they're going
don't-
to find.
They
yeah.
know they're down there and they don't want it to come forward because that would be
Right.
more evidence. So there's
If
a
you're in the
couple different
military
stories
or the
about the
government,
ocean.
yeah, not only is your reputation on the line, your job's on the line. You could lose your pension, your health care, have your family threatened. A number of Roswell eyewitnesses say our families were threatened with death. They said, we're going to take your bodies and bury them in the desert. No one will ever know.
Yeah.
You keep your mouth shut. And they were pretty
Yeah.
serious about this. It's even worse when you're in the military and you take these oaths and you break them. You could go to the brig for a long time. So you'd have to be pretty brave to come forward.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, I
Heck yeah.
remember when that show, it was fictional, but remember when Project Blue Book was on and they were talking about there was a couple of crafts that was found on farmers and they portrayed it in the story on the show that the government did come forward and they threatened like everybody down to their grandma, It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to keep your mouth shut to save your family.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Moon at Noon makes a good comment, kind of makes you think, why would something so advanced enough to travel between the stars crash dozens of times while here?
I get this question a lot in the interviews I do. We have pilots who are familiar with our air, our land, our gravitational fields, our weather, and they still crash airplanes. Aliens are not familiar with our world. They're not familiar with our gravitational forces, electromagnetism in our atmosphere, our weather, lightning strikes. And so why can't they have pilot error, mechanical error, weather-related crashes? They don't know our planet like we do. They're not infallible. I can see crashes happening, especially if it's a kind of bio-robot, this creature that's been created in a laboratory, as Philip Corso suggested. And that's why the Cape Girardeau stories, there were 3 identical big bulbous head creatures that matched Roswell very much. So how would they know how to handle all the difficulties? Plus, in 1941, World War I was raging across Europe and in Japan, the Pacific Theater. So you might have gotten too close and gotten a stray shot and managed to sputter across the atmosphere and just crash landed. It happened to be in Cape Girardeau. For all we know, they could have taken a shot from the war going on. So there's all kinds of reasons why we can't say that aliens are perfect beings. They're fallible like we are.
Sure, absolutely. Our friend Tex asks, what about the Aurora, Texas crash? Do you know anything about that, either of you?
Yeah, I've read about that, and I'm not sure myself. Kevin Randall is a UFO researcher, and Bill Burns is a UFO researcher called the UFO Hunter, had his own TV show. They both looked into Aurora and said there's nothing extraterrestrial there, that they don't think it was an actual spaceship that crashed. If anything crashed, they said they think it was a metal-clad balloon. They were testing it like Fort Hood or Fort Worth, Texas, and it got it floated away, it couldn't be handled, and it came to a halt in Aurora. That could be possible. Also, in those days, you would tell tall tales in Texas and sometimes put them in the paper and maybe exaggerate or distort. Journalistic standards were not what they are today. So that story seems a little shaky. It's interesting, but no proof that it was alien there either.
Yeah, wow, it's crazy stuff. And Miss Naoma, she says a lot of people believe that the reptilians walk among us. There have been many reports of seeing seemingly normal people suddenly have slitted irises. I've heard that too.
I've seen.
Did you see that video of that woman on an airplane who freaked out?
Yeah, I see that was
off of this plane. This person next to her did just as Naoma Finn just suggested or mentioned. That she saw this and it freaked her out. I don't know what to say. I've never seen such a phenomenon, but who knows?
Maybe that woman would have said, maybe if she would have said, "Hey, their eyes weren't right, or their skin changed colors," or gave us some explanation about. But all she said was that person is not human. Well, that thing is not human.
Mm-hmm.
I heard she's been approached to be interviewed and nobody knows where she's at. Take it.
Yeah,
for what
I've heard that too.
Yeah.
Take it for what you will.
That is
Yeah.
true. That she doesn't seem to have done a follow-up interview or taken advantage of
I
this.
can't
Like
find her.
she's been
Supposedly
silenced.
nobody knows what happened to her. She's just gone.
Oh.
Isn't that kind of interesting? There was also a kid that was like 15 years old, and it was on a TikTok video, and he's on there explaining his theory of all these dimensions, and he's just a kid. Nobody knows where this kid is at.
Wow. Did you guys see that?
How old was he, did you say?
He was 15. Very intelligent. And I mean, I forget the exact details, but he was going on about how he had it all figured out, how they could transport and how the spaceships were moving with such speed and the different species and everything. And then all of a sudden he comes up missing.
Wow. Did you guys hear anything about, I guess it was a TikTok video of supposedly a crash in Las Vegas, I believe it was. And then it was a young kid that got footage of an alien. Did you guys hear or see anything about that?
I've seen it.
Yeah, apparently that's a fake, that the police arrived, looked around, found nothing. They did say that someone seemed to have drawn a big circle in the dust in their backyard, looked like with their boot, and that was their evidence that the kid may have made this up. But he too has gone silent. He doesn't want to give interviews. But is that because he's scared of aliens, or that he's been caught in a hoax and maybe his family went along with it for laughs? But the police did look into it, and that was on the news a month or two ago, and there doesn't seem to be anything that's come out of this of any substance.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing old with purpose makes a comment. I just don't think it's a good idea to try and shoot every UFO down before we try to communicate peacefully. What are we getting ourselves up to? I agree.
I would agree with that. Yeah. You don't want to stir these people up if they have advanced technology. They might have advanced weapons. And second, we haven't been invaded yet. There hasn't been extraterrestrial landings and invasions. And now we're all armed, and nations are armed with nuclear weapons, biological weapons. It would be the dumbest time in human history to try to invade Earth when we've got all of this technology of our own. We were still living in log cabins, like 150 years ago without any mechanized cars. So to attack aliens to avoid hostile race, I don't think they're hostile.
Yeah, gotcha.
They're just curious is all.
Yeah.
You see on Star Trek every week they go out and look at different worlds, and they circle around in their spaceship, and they sometimes land and walk around, and they're not hostile, they're just curious. And they have the Prime Directive, which they seem to violate each week, so they have a show, but Captain Kirk and his crew interact with other races, and then they have an adventure and take off. But it might be somewhat the same way in real life. A federation of planets that visits Earth, and they look around here and take some readings and observe us and watch our civilization advance or decay in some places. And then they take off and maybe make a scientific report for their own planet.
Yeah. Growing old with purpose. I already know Teri's answer to this, but what is yours? What do you think of Dr. Greer's CE5 program?
I'm not sure what to make of that. I've heard some people think he's the greatest, and others think he's a charlatan, that he's just a con taken in hundreds of dollars per person. And maybe you can enlighten me. I don't know a great deal about him, but I get a variety of opinions on him.
Teri, you're up. I know you have something to say.
Well, I've been following him for several years now, and I believe in the CE5 program and what they're trying to do. But I have heard from a lot of other top-notch people that he's out for a buck. I think he started in 92 with good intentions, and he's the one that built the program, and I have faith in what he's trying to get accomplished. But yeah.
Well,
I heard to go out with him on a trip is so expensive that, you have to have big money.
Just the price to go see him at a lecture.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
that's crazy. That's astronomical. I don't believe that he needs to charge that much money.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a
He's
combination
saying
of
that his
both.
money's going for documentaries and see, he doesn't ask any help to make all these documentaries that he's made, to like bring awareness to everybody. So I can kind of see it from both sides. I mean, he's doing it all himself. Not, he wants, supposedly, and why he's doing it by himself is because he wants to control, and he wants to make sure the information that he's trying to get across gets not cut out of his documentary. So, I mean, he is financing everything that he's doing basically out of his own pocket. So,
Wow.
I can see both sides of the fence. So I'm just hanging in the middle.
Yeah.
This is America. It is a capitalist state. You're free to monetize anything, and people will pay it.
Right.
And it's his business.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're past the hour and a half mark. This has been a great show.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, you are so informative. I've really enjoyed this.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
I have to say, I have all 3 books, and they are well worth the read.
Yep. And you can find them on Amazon. And Paul, are they under Paul Blake Smith?
You can find them on Amazon or some of my first books at aargus.com. My current Foundations publishers actually don't sell the books from their site anymore. They just refer you to Amazon. And if you're looking for an accurate review, just listen to Teri over here. She'll tell you that I do try to cram in lots of information, give you various sources, and make it as entertaining as I can. But I don't like crazy wild fantasies or stuff that's not true. So I try to put in facts only, actual allegations, and look into whatever I can confirm within presidential records. And so I'm glad that Teri likes it. I think you'll like them too. And you can go to Amazon.com. But in the future, I'll have another book coming out that you can order directly from Argus.com, where the shipping is free.
Cool. Growing Old with Purpose asks, what book should they read first?
Since I've got this new compendium coming that engulfs all of Cape Girardeau in one book, and it's not out yet, start with the Eisenhower book, then the Nixon book, which is pretty much a sequel. And then by this fall, my Cape Girardeau book will be out from Argus, and I have a few bits of new data and a few corrections to make. And there are some photographs in the appendix. And so it'll be not like anything you've seen before. I just hope that people don't go out and start wandering the fields in Cape Girardeau in the farm fields outside of town. I hope I didn't pinpoint it too closely and people will behave themselves.
You didn't, but I'm not going to lie. If we're in the area, I can't say that Brandy and Teri and myself wouldn't be looking.
Yeah, there's no harm in driving around. I'm just not going
to get out and walk because you have me convinced with the rattlesnake. So I'll drive by the road and get some binoculars, maybe.
There you go. There you go. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in this week, and this has been just a great night, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. We'll have to have you back again for sure.
Well, I'd like to be on maybe later this fall, like November or so, when the other book comes out.
Yes.
And I sure thank you for having me on. It was a good spirited discussion. Yeah. And I'm always open to intelligent people who have probing questions without being cynical or disrespectful or snide or something like that. And I enjoyed the show, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yep, absolutely. And everybody, next week, tune in on Thursday night. We have our friend Greg Ogles. He just released a Bigfoot documentary recently, so we're going to talk to him about that. And next Friday, we have D.A. Roberts and Robbie Raines, and we're going to talk Gugway. So next week is Cryptid Week, I guess we could call it.
Bigfoot Week. Yeah, it's Bigfoot Week next week. All right.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and have a good weekend. And thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.